Hey, welcome back to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. I'm Angela, and this is.
And I'm Kat.
we'll get it right one of these
One
days.
day.
The live shows are currently streamed to Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Yeah, I think I hit all of those. Please remember to follow and subscribe if you enjoy our show and share it with your friends. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I talk about things we find interesting for about 30 minutes. And today's topic is, why does kindness matter? And of course, we've got a quote, but I don't know if we want to get right into the quote today. What do you think, Kat?
I have it queued up.
Okay.
But if you have something that you'd like to say before we start into it.
No, I think I'm just being kind with myself, like I said to you before the show, which we can talk about later.
All right. Well, this quote is from David Hamilton, PhD. And he says, thinking of things that annoy us fuels feelings of stress, and subsequently, the physiology of stress. Thinking kindness does the opposite. Thinking kind things about people, which generates kind feelings, can be a simple way to reduce stress.
100%. As you're reading this, I think I was reading the book that I found the quote in when I was going through a struggle with a family member. And I could not get, a lot of times I'll go and find books. I love to read. And I was really struggling. And then when they would come into the room, I would find myself like flaring up in anger or frustration. And then I was noticing that how I was interpreting the things that they were doing was not helpful. And so I really, really, really had to work hard at going to a place of love for them. And I had to like purposefully, where is that little bit of love in me for them? Because I know it's there, because I don't think I can hate without ever loving, because, in fact, in some ways, I think I'm even more connected to someone I hate than when I love.
That's the truth.
Yeah, but it did, by doing that, it certainly did help me shift into kindness, not only for myself, but toward the other person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny because when we were deciding to, on topics and we were talking about it yesterday, I was thinking of my experience on Saturday. So my neighbor across the street decided to have a huge party at his house with a live band full of speakers and everything. And it was incredibly loud. I actually downloaded a decibel counter, and it was well over 110 decibels. I mean, it was just obnoxious. And in my house, it was 65 with all the windows closed.
Oh, wow.
And it was a nice night. I would have loved to have had the windows open and, get the fresh air in the house.
So, were the walls shaking?
Oh, yeah, because we had the big booming bass and everything like that. And I'm just getting madder and madder and madder. And I called the police and I said, this is ridiculous. I said, I don't mind if people have parties. I don't mind if they have music, but the loudness of it was just ridiculous. And then to add matters to that, they had all these trucks with these booming without the mufflers, and they're driving up and down the street and lights flashing and everything. And it was just, obnoxious. I mean, I closed all my curtains, but it was still. So we called the police a couple times. We called the neighbor and said, did you call the police on this? Because this is ridiculous. And she called the police, and it was just this whole thing. And the more it happened, the police didn't come. And as I found out later, there was a really bad accident. I live in a very small village. and so they were dealing with that, which is understandable. But finally, we had to call back, and actually, my wife went over to the police department, and that was a whole thing. And then they finally came, and they just completely shut it down.
Wow.
Oh, their cars were also blocking fire hydrants too, which is obviously.
Oh, wow. So how so you're fueling this anger
Oh,
with every beat of that song. I'm assuming, I'm just to use that as a metaphor. It's like, and did it escalate inside of you that, like,
oh my God, yes. I was, it didn't help matters that I was having a little bit of a migraine with that, and I was trying to meditate, to to think kind thoughts, and all I could think of was all the things that I wanted to do to this neighbor, who's already obnoxious, and he's kind of on my list anyway because we had a confrontation when he blocked my driveway with his stupid truck.
oh dear,
Um,
stupid truck. It's not just a
yes,
truck right now. It's still a
it's
stupid
a
truck.
stupid truck. Yes. If you saw these trucks, I mean, they do all these things to the trucks that make them look cool, and they really make them look stupid, in my opinion. But anyway, I admit it. I will admit
There
it.
is no judgment here.
Yeah,
That
and
was
well,
sarcastic. There's a lot of judgment here.
yeah. Well, he blocked my driveway, and I'm trying to get out, and he was because he's got these trucks that he works on for this truck club. He was blocking my driveway, and he was moving the trucks around because if he wants to take one out, he's got to move all the others out because we just have one long, one car driveway, but it's long, so you can fit several on there. And I said, I really need to go. Can you please move your truck? And he just flipped me off and then started calling me a bunch of names. And I was very nice, but after that, I was furious because I was running late to something. And I was like, all right, so I've always kind of had that seething little, you know, simmering anger for him because of that. Um, and so then this just added to it, and it just like, it brought it to a complete boil.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking of all the things that I wanted to do.
The music
What could
last
I,
night brought it to the complete
yeah,
boil. Okay.
yeah, like what could I do to him? I thought of like taking my dog's feces and rubbing it on the handle of his car so that when he opened the car, I mean, things like are really, really, yeah, I know it's gross. Things that are really kind of sick. Not that I would do it, but I was entertaining those thoughts. And I was living in that. And the more I thought about that kind of stuff, the more stressed I got.
What do you mean by the more stressed you got?
Well, it just fed it. It was, if it was like a fire, so maybe rather than a boil, think of it like a fire. So it was a nice low fire, at first from that incident, last summer, and this just brought it to this big blazing thing. And every time I thought of the revenge that I'd love to do, just for him being so inconsiderate, and I think
Mm.
that's really the issue is like just being so inconsiderate to your neighbors that he thought he could block my thing. And when I asked him kindly, move your truck, I get this vitriol. Exactly. Yes. Threw
Yeah.
gasoline on that fire. That's what I was doing. So thinking of all the revenge,
Yeah.
and it didn't affect him because he didn't know what the heck was going on inside of me. He was enjoying
Right.
his party, at least until the police came finally and shut it down.
Now, what
Uh,
was happening inside of you physically?
my headache got worse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that knot in my stomach just kind of came up and was just in my chest and doing that, and I'm just getting angrier and angrier, and I was trying. I have tools to use, and I know. I love that, Jan. I knew what to do, but it was just out of control. Again, from throwing that gasoline on the fire.
So, even though you had all this knowledge, using the tools became extremely difficult because it sounds like you were so dysregulated at that point.
Mhm.
Um, that do you think that at any point early on there was anything you could have done so that you could have, like, all of the steps could have been out of from a different perspective, maybe from a perspective of love or kindness?
I don't know. This is something I've been thinking a lot about the past few days about that. Again, that kind of simmering anger. I tried to approach him that first time with kindness. Please move your car. I need to go. And I just got this entitled attitude, and just screw you. And that to me is just like I gave out kindness and I
Mm.
got back dog poop.
So when we give out kindness, or we require, or is someone required, is there a cost for our kindness? Are they required to give that back to us?
They're not really, and I know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think it's kind of like that social contract that we expect it. You say if you're kind to people, you'll get it back. And
Yeah.
that is true in most cases. Most people, when you're kind to them, and I try to practice kindness. I'm always kind to people, well, for the most part. I mean, I have my moments. I'm not going to say always, because I'd be lying if I said that. But kindness and respect, because that's what I want back. And
Yeah.
most of the time, I get that, and I think it's just so, like, when you don't get it and you're expecting it, I think you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah. I'm thinking of, it's much easier, I think, in school, for instance, because kids generally get categorized or things like that. And one of my sisters works with children and emotionally disturbed. I think it's a therapeutic learning center is what it's called. And these kids come in, and so she can know already that they're struggling with this ability. But then we go out into real life, and at least for me, I forget that people might be struggling or not even have the capacity to behave the way that I think they should. And what's really interesting is that, I got a chance to observe in the classroom, and these kids can push and push and push and push. Um, and I don't even know how else to put it. And I don't even know that they know what they're doing. And I think sometimes we don't know what we're doing. Um, and I think it's Byron Katie who says, if someone's hurting you, they're confused. Because
mm,
if we're all love, and I'm trying to think about, because I do it too, right? I get into these situations where I'm triggered and I'm angry and I want to hold on to that anger, and I have difficulty letting go of it. It's not for me, it's not forgive and forget, it's forgive and learn. Because some
mm,
people, it's just about knowing who they are, but the more self-aware I am, I think the easier it is to be kind and just know who they are and have my boundary where it needs to be for me, so that I feel safe in that environment, which is
mm-hmm,
really, it's really hard, or it can be hard, um, because, especially in families or with neighbors, where we have we're close to people,
mm-hmm,
it's easy to lose that cool, or to shift. I might even say shift out of the heart and into the head, like, oh, if I just force this solution right here, if I just walk up to this person and tell them how it is and make sure that they do all the quote unquote right things. But then I also have to wonder, how do we even know what's right or wrong? And and then I have to figure out what's right or wrong in this situation, because in one situation, it might be appropriate to do one thing and not the other. And in another situation, vice versa. you know? But how do I stay in that kindness, or how do I stay coming from love? That's my big thing that I'm
Mhm.
constantly trying to work on. How do I?
No, I know. I'm completely with you on that one, and I know you and I have had lots of conversations about that.
Yeah,
Um, and it's hard. Here's this neighbor that I really don't interact with. Um, to the point. I mean, I say hello to all my neighbors. I talk to all my neighbors. I don't talk to this guy at all. I mean, I tried the one day, and and it just blew up. Uh, in that way. I mean, and before that, I had always said, waved hello and kind of stuff like that. But here was an interaction is that he was just, I think, being completely oblivious to anybody else. And I'm guessing that's probably the same thing with the kids, because they've probably had such a difficult life, um, and they only have themselves. They feel like they don't have that community of love, of kindness, um, that we've been fortunate for the most part to have. Yes, there's been issues and problems as with everybody, but we at least know that kindness, and we know that
yeah.
love. And so I see the two things as I see the end result the same, but the thing different. The neighbor didn't care about anybody else except what he wanted, which was to have this big blowout party. These kids are just trying to survive and
Well, and
to
it can show up too like that, a blowout party. This is just, and it looks like that. This is just what they
right.
want right now. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And so I think that's why kindness does matter. And it first has to start within ourselves.
yeah. So how did you, after that situation, how did you find your way back to being kind to yourself? Or even is that still something you're working on right now since this just recently happened?
Um, um, in one way, I'm still working on it because I'm trying to figure out why I get so triggered and why I let it get to that point where I'm throwing gasoline on the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's something I'm still going to have to work through. But in terms of the initial kindness, so I had the bad headache. All I wanted to do on Saturday night was watch a little television in peace. Curl up with my dog and my wife, and just chill.
Yeah.
And instead it just was this. So finally, and that was the other thing, because I know I was so worked up, I couldn't even go to bed. So I was up till like 1 a.m, which is very late for me, watching television just to bring my, to kind of calm down. I needed
Mm-hmm.
that kind of disconnect from my own brain and my own thoughts
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to, and just enjoy some, relatively mindless television, just to have that disconnect.
Were you
Um,
able to disconnect, or did those thoughts keep coming through about why they were so horrible, these neighbors?
no, actually, I was once the police shut the party down. Then we watched them all scurry away, all the guests. Um, we couldn't help but hear it because of the loud trucks. But then we were just like, okay, let's just watch TV. Are you ready for bed? No, I'm not ready for bed yet. I'm too worked up. And then after the first episode, you want to watch another one? Yeah, I'm still worked up. So it wasn't kind
Mm-hmm.
of the thing. It was just kind of letting it settle in,
Mm-hmm.
and just like, okay, and just
Now,
enjoying the quiet.
were you also? I'm just interested. What was happening with beating yourself up? Was that still happening with, oh, I could have done this better or differently or whatever, or was it just still? needing to kind of dissociate so that you could process?
Well, part of it was I made the initial call, and I called the neighbor, and my wife was the one who got involved, who called again, and she was the one who, on her own, not at any prompting from me, said, "I'm done," and went over to the police department, and it was a whole thing. But that was really what got them to come, and we're talking, this was a matter of like 3 hours.
Oh, so I could
Yeah.
only imagine escalating inside of myself and not thinking this is ever going to end.
Yeah. And and so I didn't I knew from my previous experience that going over and asking them to turn it down would not have worked, and possibly could have been harmful to myself, and I'm talking about physical harm, because I don't know these people.
Right.
And one-on-one is one thing with a guy, but with a whole group of these people, I don't know. So I knew that was going to be futile.
Yeah.
And I really know, the only people who had the authority to do anything were the police. And like I said, I had called, my wife had called, the neighbors had called, and that didn't shut it down or tone it down. Again, I would have been fine with it being toned down.
Right.
Because I don't want to anybody to think I'm a buzzkill, because I'm really not. Lots of neighbors around here have parties, and they've had them all summer long, and it's been fine because it's been respectful.
Right.
And but 10 o'clock's rolling around, and I'm just like, okay, I've listened to this for over 3 hours. I'm done. My head is pounding. I haven't been able to enjoy my evening. Everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I didn't want to be active, because I didn't want to, I was trying to use those tools, and I just think I was just so distracted. I couldn't do it. But I was
like so
grateful when my wife,
dysregulated.
I was grateful when my wife went, she's like, okay, she's going to take care of it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, because Byron Katie has this quote that says, as long as you think that the cause of your problem is quote unquote out there, as long as you think that anyone or anything is responsible for your suffering, the situation is hopeless. It means that you are forever in the role of victim, that you're suffering in paradise. I'm wondering, everything we've talked about, somebody comes to you with that quote, what does that feel like when it's like, I mean,
and here the thing is that I know that quote. I've read that quote, and I knew that, and I knew it. So
yeah,
on one hand, I did what I could, called the police.
yeah,
Got the neighbor to call the police, because I figured if it's just one person, they might just think, oh, it's an old crank, But if multiple people are calling, perhaps they would see that if there's something. Oh yeah, maybe there is a real problem if multiple people are calling about this one party. But
right,
again, I don't know if other neighbors were calling. But I wanted to get out of that place of being that victim. I'm the
right.
victim of this ridiculous party.
So was that one of the thoughts that kept going through your head? I'm a victim of this party, kind of thing, or along
Not
those lines?
not per se. I didn't use the word in my interior dialogue as a victim, but it was more about. I mean, I guess that was the thought behind it. Why is he so inconsiderate? Doesn't he care about his neighbors? Well, obviously not. He's a renter. He's not a homeowner. All that kind of stuff. Of course he doesn't give a crap. So I'm just kind of going around and around and around about all the reasons why he's such a horrible person and why it's affecting me. But I didn't say he was making me a victim, but I did feel like a victim.
Right. Yeah. That's it. It's just got me thinking about, what could, I mean, obviously, I'm not in that situation. I have been in that situation. What would happen if your thought process shifted to something like, well, this guy's really suffering, and there's still a clear boundary for me, and my boundary is I need to go to sleep. What would that look like, so that you could come from love in all of the steps and maybe not dysregulate as much.
Yeah. Well, I don't really know him to know if he's suffering or not. That's the first thing. So I guess maybe, that's part of the problem. When it's just a neighbor you're waving to, and then it broke down the one time you have communication. So I already have that set up as that, he's selfish and only cares about himself. I was kind in the moment that I needed something from him, because he blocked my driveway.
Right.
And, so I already have this, right or wrong, I already have this judgment of him.
Yeah.
And then he does other things to reinforce it,
Yeah.
by having this loud, obnoxious party. So I can't, I can't say, because I don't know him. What I
Right.
do know of him is that he's inconsiderate and obnoxious.
But then how do
And
you
that's
treat
being
him when you
kind.
say then how do you treat him when you believe he's that inconsiderate, obnoxious person? Like, just even having that belief.
Well, there's the boundary, is that, okay, I'm going to choose not to interact with you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I could not have gone to sleep, the music was just too loud.
Yeah.
And being a woman of a certain age, I need to sleep with my windows open because it's nice and cool.
Yeah. Well,
And so I
here's
had to
another
open the window
question.
back up because the house was getting stuffy.
Yeah, here's another question. Can he be inconsiderate and obnoxious and you still choose kindness? Like, toward yourself and toward him?
Yeah.
I
Well, I think
I, I don't know the answer.
I think the kindest thing that I can do is, when my head does go to those places, is just not to act on those. As much as I would love to take and wipe dog poop on the handle of his stupid truck, um, you know, um, and that's the calmest thing that I want to do. I mean, others are like taking baseball bats and things like that, but I don't want to go to jail. So, poop I probably could get away with, but I won't do that, because um, I don't want it to come back on me. And I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying is not face the consequences of that. I don't want the karma of that to come back to me.
Mm.
And the truth is that that's not the person I want to be. I want to be the person who comes from kindness, because I know, the second part of this, I know what the kindness can do. So the kindest thing that I can do in regards to this neighbor is to set my boundary, which is, I'm not going to interact with him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to actively do anything. Now, of course, if I ever saw him in trouble, if I saw him go out in the middle of winter and slip on ice and couldn't get up because he broke his ankle, of course I would do something.
Yeah.
Because I would want somebody to do that for me, even though I don't like him, and he wasn't kind to me. And he wasn't kind to the other people in our neighborhood by having such a loud, obnoxious party. I'm going to choose kindness.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I actually had a neighbor back in the day, living in an apartment complex, an upstairs neighbor who did similar things, to the loud music, the late at night, and it was so frustrating. And he had no idea. And we would see each other because I'm downstairs, he's upstairs, right? And so I helped to foster that relationship a little bit, and what happened over time is, one time, gosh, it was, number one, he gave me his number, but number two, when he came down, well, actually, first, he was down in the apartment because I had needed something that he could do. Like I had needed something done, and I asked him, and he came down, and the music had been up, and he didn't turn it down when he came down. And he's like, "Is it really that loud?" He had absolutely no idea how loud or how much it had impacted me. And I had just kept genuinely like, "Hey, would you mind, keep," and he admitted he was getting frustrated, and he had struggled throughout life. I found out later, he had been to prison, he had a son at home. Like there was some big stuff going on in his life that led him to this point. And I just had to keep, I guess the best way to say it is, reaching out that olive branch until he actually saw it, because he could not see it. I mean, I try to think of all the things I don't see in my life, and having to remember, like when my kids are like, "Mom, you blah, blah, blah," I have to really look inside and be like, "Oh, yeah, I could see that."
Yeah.
That humility, it's like, I don't like that.
Well, and it's very interesting that you say that, because I know there's been other people in my life that I've had issues with, and coming to that realization, yes, that there are things going on. And I think that's why I'm trying to choose kindness.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like in all cases. And I don't
Yeah.
have it right. I'm a work in progress.
Aren't we
But that's
all?
why I think topics like this, I mean, I'm glad we kind of talked about this, because it makes us realize those things. And I love the points that you brought up. And, so now I'm going to have to think about it. And maybe I'm going to have to, you know, open my heart a little bit for this guy. Uh,
It's so hard, because here I am talking about, here are some of these tools, and yet in my life, still these things come up, and
yeah.
I do it too. And I will totally admit to it. I'm sitting on the couch a week ago, and somebody comes down the street and they're revving their engine, and it turned out to be a Harley, and I'm like, "Rar, rar, rar, who's revving their Harley? It's a Sunday night," or something like that. Well, funnily enough, it was my brother-in-law on his brand new Harley. And
That's
I,
so funny.
so, but I
Coming to
didn't
your
get up
house to
to
show it,
check
to
to
show
show it
you.
off. Yeah, I didn't get up to check. Brooke came down the hall and says, "Oh, the uncle's outside." Oh, okay, because it also, the other thought that came through my mind is it's probably one of Brooke's car people, like, but I can't.
Well, Brooke
So
might like our neighbor.
yeah, right, she may really enjoy that in her life right now, but my point is like those thoughts still come into my mind, and I am constantly having to shift, and I am by no means at all perfect with this, because I still make my judgments, um and then I try to remember that if somebody's triggering me, I need to work it out. It's showing me something important in me, but it's, and sometimes it's telling me a lot of things that's important about the other person, and where I need to set those boundaries. So while kindness matters, I think for me, I want to leave with the question of, okay, kindness does matter, and how can I use kindness and still set, clear boundaries and be safe about it?
I couldn't have said it better. Actually, that's pretty much what I was thinking to close out. And I know we're way over time for us,
We're 4
but
minutes over. How dare we?
it's been a great discussion. And
Yeah. Check out the information in the doobly doo, as Scott Carney would say. Kat's information about her show is in there, as well as links to both of our socials. So we shall see you next week. Have a good one.
bye,
Bye.
everyone.